This is my audience. Hi, my name is Jacob Maurstad, and this is my informative speech. Alcohol has always been an integral part of the U.S. culture. A study done by the AAC shows that the people that consider themselves drinkers, they drink on average 16 drinks a week. Today I'd like to talk about Prohibition, which I think is one of the most interesting parts of U.S. history that not many people know about. I myself feel that I can talk about this because I am a history buff. I have read many books and articles on this, and so I feel informed to speak on it. Today I will talk about the events leading up to Prohibition, the period of Prohibition itself from 1920 to 1933, and the lasting effects of Prohibition. Now I will talk on the events that led up to Prohibition. Prohibition really starts in about 1850. Boston University believes that men were drinking about 2.5 gallons of pure alcohol a year. This caused problems in the home, such as domestic violence, and women really believed that alcohol was the problem. Because of that, they made the Women's Christian Temperance Movement in the 1850s, which sought to end the sale of alcohol in saloons. They had some initial success. A lot of northern states actually banned alcohol in this time period, but they had to get rid of those laws because of the Civil War. And they also had problems that they were an organization run by women at a time where women didn't have a lot of political power. And they also were focused on other things such as women's suffrage that caused them to not be able to solely focus on the Prohibition problem. In 1893, the Anti-Saloon League was started by Wayne Wheeler. This group used anti-immigrant sentiments to basically tell people that the drinking cultures of the Italians, Germans, and the Irish would morally corrupt the United States. In 1917, when World War I began, they used anti-German sentiment to basically say that beer and drinking alcohol was anti-American and treasonous. This paved the way for the 18th Amendment to be enacted in 1920. I will now talk about the period of Prohibition from 1920 to 1933. Initially, the law actually had some success. It was believed that alcohol was down about 30% consumption-wise, and many people tried to follow the law. There was two problems, though. One, the U.S. government needed to have a huge workforce working around the clock, attempting to enforce this law, which goes against the small government beliefs of the time. And two, people like to drink. People began to using illegal stills and home brews for their alcohol consumption. Corruption began rampant. Police officers would take bribes in the streets. Many of those police officers were drinkers themselves. Organized crime began to go rampant as the hole left by the U.S. government was filled by organized crime families who gained power and violence that lasted for decades to come. And the law itself just became very unpopular. A new women's movement called the Women's Organization for National Prohibition Reform was created that began pressuring the U.S. government. The final straw, however, was the 1929 stock market crash. The U.S. government no longer had the money nor the will to enforce the law, and many U.S. people were just more worried about feeding their families than the actual enforcement of the law. I will now speak on the effects of the law. Some problems. The PBS organization believes that the Prohibition cost the U.S. government about $11 billion in taxes over the years and $300 million just to enforce the law. To fill the hole that was left behind from alcohol taxes, the U.S. government created the income tax, which is still used to this day. Some pros, however, this was the first use of women's organizations to cause political change in the U.S., which paved the way for women's suffrage. Causing men to drink at home actually made them drink and interact with their wives, which caused the stigma of men and women interactions to go away. And finally, places like speakeasies were the first instances of genders and races coming together in a social setting that was never seen before, which caused the way for the civil rights movements in the years to come. In conclusion, this was a huge law that did not really fill its main goals. I talked about the events that led up to Prohibition, Prohibition itself, and the effects of Prohibition. This has been my informative speech. Thank you.